Hey everybody, welcome to XSC Chat. I'm Serge.
I'm Rob.
I'm Gen Z.
I am Gen X.
And today we are doing a Sabaton History reaction. So we recently reacted to their song, The Final Solution. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the history behind it. So and of course it is going to be about the Holocaust as is shown in the title. So, and there's also, they put up a content warning. So for those of you who are more sensitive to kind of like graphic and violent images or like history, this might not be the one for you.
Right.
Yeah. So.
All right, let's take it away. And the historian is
Indy Nidell.
That's right.
Yeah.
Really like.
Are you making me say the name because you don't remember it, or?
No, because I like the way you say it. It just kind of rolls off.
Oh yeah.
You just roll it out.
I see.
Indy Nidell.
Indy Nidell. Yeah. So I associate his name with indie games. That's my like mnemonic for remembering.
Indie games.
Indie games. It's a category of it's a category of games where it's like for example, like an independent creator.
Oh.
So it's like done by like a solo developer, for example. Yeah.
Cool.
Or like a small group, I think, in some cases. But yeah.
Yeah.
So ready?
Yes.
All right, let's jump in.
This episode of Sabaton History is about one of the darkest chapters in human history.
This is the final solution.
Wow.
It happened on November 9th, 1938. The National Socialist leadership of Germany had gathered in Munich to commemorate the Beer Hall Putsch, Adolf Hitler's failed attempt to grab power 15 years earlier. Then the news arrived that Ernst von Rath had succumbed to his wounds. He was a young German diplomat who had been shot in the German embassy in Paris by Herschel Greenspan, a Polish-German Jew. Joseph Goebbels, German propaganda minister, now addressed the party officials and spoke vividly of a globe.
He was also a very infamous character, Goebbels, the propaganda minister.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He and Hitler are both known for being really evil.
Jewish conspiracy that aimed to push Germany into a war with France. Outraged, the men rushed to the telephones and urged their local Nazi henchmen to act. What followed was Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass. A nationwide pogrom against Jewish communities in Germany. 1,000 synagogues and prayer rooms were vandalized or set on fire. 7,500 shops were wrecked and looted. Jewish neighborhoods were attacked, and 90 Jews were killed. It was the climax of years of anti-Jewish policies and harassment. Adolf Hitler's chancellorship had turned anti-Semitic rhetoric into state policy. Since mid-1935, Jews faced increased harassment. Under Reinhard Heydrich, the German Security Service, SD, began monitoring Jewish organizations and affairs more closely. To the Nazis, Judaism was not only totally alien to German culture, but also the natural enemy of National Socialism. Hitler believed in an international Jewry that pulled the strings behind both Soviet Bolshevism and Anglo-Saxon capitalism, and Germany must free itself from their influence once and for all. For the Führer's planned cleansing of the Reich, Heydrich recruited Adolf Eichmann, a former desk worker at Dachau concentration camp. It would be his job to implement these stricter policies aimed at excluding Jews from the German economy and everyday public life. By making their lives as miserable as possible, they would push the Jews to voluntarily emigrate from the Reich. They were not to feel welcome nor safe in Germany.
Voluntarily. Of course, there's nothing voluntary about it in the sense, because they're like pressured into it, and they'd be threatened if they didn't do that.
That's right.
And so everyone would kind of be driven out forcibly.
And public opinion was to be swayed accordingly. Over the following years, Jews were denied entry into theaters, into cinemas, museums, and restaurants.
Basically,
they were banned from using public
citizens.
Transportation and even owning bicycles.
Well, they were seen not only as lesser citizens, but the Nazis created in educational ways, showing in their sick and warped scientific viewpoint that they were lesser human, and showed through poor education that they were subhuman.
Eugenics, yeah.
Yes.
Through eugenics.
Yeah. And they would have different ways of trying to prove that. And so with people who thought, well, we're a little cerebral here and we're really logical, the Nazis could say, and here is your, here is your reason for thinking the way that we want you to think.
Yeah.
So we're not just telling you this, but we're showing you this through falsified, what we say today is misinformation, but eugenics.
Right. Yeah. And what really surprises me is a lot of people, they say that, not a lot of people, but there are some people who deny that the Holocaust ever happened.
Oh,
and they say that it's not real and it's all propaganda or whatever. But I'm like, how can you not? There's like so much documentary evidence and like historic evidence that this incident occurred. That it's like, how can you deny that was a thing when there's like over 6 million people who died as a result of it?
Yeah, there's no way you can in your right mind deny it.
Yeah.
Shopping was restricted to 1 hour a day, and there was a strict curfew in the evening. And Jews were not allowed to buy certain things like cigars or flowers. They were not allowed to own telephones or typewriters either. They eventually had to wear a yellow badge to visibly differentiate themselves from everyone else, and they paid extra taxes. The Nuremberg racial laws of 1935 were set in place to legally segregate the Jews. Citizenship was restricted to people of German blood. Jews were reduced to mere subjects of the Reich, without political rights. They were fired from the civil service. Teachers and professors were ousted. Jewish-owned shops were attacked. The Hitler Youth Organization chased Jews out of public spaces. The laws were so strictly enforced that even the smallest misconduct could lead to imprisonment or worse. Jews lived under a constant fear of inspections, house searches, and death threats. And then Kristallnacht happened. Hitler, however, was furious at Goebbels about inciting all the violence in the streets. An unregulated mob roaming the streets not only discredited Nazi authority, but also had a sobering effect on the German people. Many bystanders were shocked by the uncontrolled violence and the lawless behavior of the mob. Worse for Hitler, they felt sympathy for the Jews that were manhandled and humiliated by the Nazi Party members.
Interesting for him to pick up on that, and he was basically worried that those representing him were gonna be so extremist that it drove away the people who are in the middle, the moderates. So like most people, there's extremists on both ends.
Sure.
But most people fall in the in between, and so as long as you can influence the people on the in between, you have control over the masses. You never want to be on an extremist endpoint, or if you are, you want to make it appear as if you also appeal to the moderates.
Sure.
So it's all his ability to be a mastermind and manipulate everyone to his will.
It's remarkable how our historian here speaks to almost like a sympathy that had grown toward the Jewish community from the German community.
Yeah. Well, they could sense it was wrong.
They could.
You could see it.
Yeah, I appreciate him saying this because I don't ever recall that actually being taught in history.
Yeah,
and surely maybe
I don't
it
hear
was,
that either.
but I don't recall ever hearing that.
Yeah, I find it interesting he brought that up, and I wonder what was the shift. Now he's probably gonna go into it, but I wonder what was the shift to where that sympathy was lost or was driven out.
Fear.
Hitler actively forbade any such organized pogroms in the future. The Jews, he insisted, were to be expelled from Germany through laws and edicts and detained far from the public eye. Over the next months, Jews who had broken the laws were sent to concentration camps, to Buchenwald, Dachau, and Sachsenhausen, which had previously housed political prisoners and actual criminals. Now the majority of the inmates were Jews. The fate of the Jews was to be tightly bound to Hitler's ambitions. On the road to war, the Führer stylized himself as something of a prophet. In his speeches, he repeatedly warned of international Jewish influence and that if the Jews would steer Germany into another world war, then they would not survive to see its end. It seems like a self-fulfilling prophecy, as by December 1941, Hitler had invaded the Soviet Union and declared war on the United States, but his belief in the international conspiracy remained, and his war became a war against Jewish life itself.
oppression, nation in despair, one man seeking reasons everywhere. Growing hate and anger, the pure sword is brother's eyes. Who was to be blamed and pay the price?
On December 20th, 1941, in a villa outside Berlin, the Wannsee Conference began. Prominent Nazi Party members met with officials from the Reich Main Security Office and from the occupied territories. Here, they would decide once and for all how to answer their Jewish question. The discussions were to offer, quote, clarity on questions of principle, and the, quote, preparation of the final solution of the Jewish question in Europe. Emigration was not enough anymore. The war had changed Judenpolitik to something far, far more sinister. Authority over the final solution was given to the SS. Its leader, Heinrich Himmler, envisioned first
The Waffen SS, the infamous, you've heard of, like the special units that committed most of the atrocities, because there's a standard army of Germany, which is the Wehrmacht. I'm not sure if I have to pronounce that correctly, but then the SS were like the really bad guys.
They were also considered the elite.
Yeah, and also something you can see in this picture here of Heinrich Himmler, which also is a famous name. You can see on his cap there's a skull, and this was something that was very common amongst Nazi officers. Was that skull on the on the cap most of the time, but whatever headgear they're wearing. Do you know what that represents?
No, tell me.
Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I read it somewhere that basically the reason they would have skulls isn't because it wasn't meant to be as like, oh, we're the evil bad guys, even though it makes you look like an evil bad guy. What it was to represent being willing to die for one's country. So it's like the idea is it's like representing that I'm willing to die for my beliefs or whatnot. So that's basically what that symbol represented. But of course now we associate it with very evil deeds because the people wearing those did evil deeds.
Sure.
Europe-wide deportations of Jews from the west to the east. Eichmann's office was ordered to prepare the removal of hundreds of thousands of Jews from Germany, Austria, Bohemia, and Moravia to the overcrowded ghettos of Eastern Europe. Since the war began in September 1939, the Jews of Galicia, the Vaterland, and Poland, organized as the Generalgouvernement, had been forced to live in segregated residential districts. But even though they were impoverished and cramped together in appalling living conditions, these Jewish communities survived. The final solution was to deny them even that. SS doctors now came into the ghettos to sort the residents into two categories. The first category was for young and healthy Jews who were able to work for the German war effort. The second was for those that could not, the old, the weak, the sick. These people were to be liquidated. The regular concentration camps had already improvised special treatment programs. That is a euphemism for the outright murder of Jews that could no longer work. Jews that were sent from the Łódź ghetto to the Chełmno camp were herded up a ramp and through a door. Behind that door, they entered the dark back compartment of a gas van. On their drive to a remote location, the men and women were asphyxiated, either with bottled carbon monoxide gas or exhaust fumes piped into the compartment.
And then later in concentration camps, they would be led into quote-unquote shower rooms.
Sure.
Where once again, it would be toxic gas.
To death.
Yeah.
Once they reached the designated burial ground, a group of Jewish prisoners was ordered to drag the dead from the van into excavated pits. At the end of the day, those workers had to enter the pit as well and were shot dead.
Wow.
The Belzec death camp was the first installation for mass murder on an industrial scale.
They didn't want
Belzec
witnesses?
was enclosed by fences of barbed wire and watchtowers, and when trains full of Jews arrived, usually an SS officer stood in front of the crowd and reassured them that they would only remain in Belzec for a short time.
Wow.
They would now have a shower and receive their valuables and other belongings afterwards. Undressed,
It's a lie.
the men walked first into a long corridor, walled off by barbed wire. Now,
it's interesting that he brings that up because I heard that exact same thing in a documentary or whatever. And the idea was that they would always get rid of the men first because the men were most likely to like start an uprising.
Sure.
And whereas everyone else, they would be more easily subdued. I believe that was the belief that they had and the reason behind why they did that. And it's interesting because I saw a movie that it showed the exact same thing where they're making this whole lighthearted facade like. And they're making it seem like, oh, don't worry, your stay will be really short and pleasant. You'll be able to go grab your stuff. Right now, we're going to let you relax, take a nice shower, and unwind from your long trip. When in reality, those lighthearted words are very ominous because you're about to be led to your
deceitful lie.
Yeah, you're being led to your slaughter, and you don't even know it. You're being told a beautiful lie, when in reality, it's a really cruel, harsh reality.
Right.
now, it was there that the Ukrainian guards took over from the Germans. Chronic shortages of manpower forced the SS to rely on multitudes of foreign auxiliaries, known as Heavies or Trolniki men. Ukrainians, Belarusians, Lithuanians, Latvians, and Poles were recruited to serve as guards at the extermination camps. Armed with bayonets, clubs, and whips, they broke any resistance with terrifying violence. The gas chambers themselves were crude, simple buildings, 4 by 8 meters long, 2 meters high, with double wooden walls. Essential was the airtight rubber-sealed door, which also had to be strong enough to resist any strong force from within. Several hundred prisoners were pressed into the small space of the gas chamber. Once the door shut behind the crowd, the lethal exhaust fumes from a dismounted Soviet tank engine were piped into the chamber. The men were so tightly packed that when the doors were again opened, the dead stood in an upright position, mouths slightly open, with their hands often pressed against their chests. The women went next, after fellow prisoners came to cut off their hair to be used for industrial purposes. By then, it must have dawned on many of the women what fate awaited them. The SS men also didn't care that the guards raped many of the young girls before sending them into the gas chamber. The dead were buried in large pits concealed from the train station, and Jewish workers tidied up the station platform before the next train arrived.
There was a country in depression, there was a nation in despair. One man finding reasons everywhere. Then there was rising hate and anger, the pure soul is still alive. Who was to be blamed and sent to die?
The final solution was a vicious cycle. Ghettos were refilled with Jews from Central Europe as the former inhabitants were sent to either labor camps or condemned to death. Each wave of roundups meant a death sentence for tens of thousands of Jews. As the SS grew in power over civil administration, the classifications changed, and more Jews were marked for death. New extermination camps were built as well. Treblinka, Majdanek, and Sobibor. Treblinka had little...
I just made a connection. He said Sobibor. There, when we were going through when he was describing like the women had their hair cut off, there was a movie that showed that exact happening, and everything that he's describing, it showed it very, it's almost like word for word what he's saying. I saw it happen in that movie, and I think you watched it with me as well.
Wasn't the movie called
Sobibor?
Yeah.
That's what it was. It was like they liberated themselves out of the camp in the movie. I don't know if that was historically accurate or not, if that actually occurred in real life. So you guys you can confirm in the comments below if that was historically accurate. But I just made that connection as he said Sobibor, because I was thinking in my head like, what was that movie name? And that relates to this to this tragedy, and that was the movie. And I think it was very well done. And if you guys haven't watched it, highly recommend it, because it really puts into perspective what it was like, because it's really surreal as you're following this group of Jews who get led into this situation, and some of them survive, some of them do not.
I think that's a Russian-produced movie. Is that right?
I don't know if
or
it's
a Soviet-produced movie, isn't it?
Possibly. It depends on the year.
Yeah,
if it's a more newer film, then
it would be Russian. Yeah, sure.
No, not Russian. It could have been made in a different country. I don't think it was, and I think it was made in a different country. I don't think they were speaking Russian. I think they were speaking maybe Belarusian or something.
I see.
Or Polish. I'm not sure. It depends. It's been a while since I saw the film.
We'll have to look it up.
Yeah, it's been a while since I saw the film, so I don't quite remember. But yeah.
Of the clean and deceptive murder machine the Nazis first envisioned. The massacres often started right at the train station, as the Jews were alerted to their impending fate by the corpses lying on the ground.
Wow.
The camp simply killed people too fast to hide its purpose. It is estimated that Treblinka killed around 4,600 people a day. That's
Wow.
nearly 200 per hour, every
Jeez.
hour. Auschwitz became the last place designated as an extermination camp, though it had been in use since early in the war as a terror.
It's interesting that it was the last when it was the most infamous, pretty much. Like anyone when they hear the name Auschwitz, they know exactly what you're
They
talking
think
about.
of the Holocaust. Sure.
Yeah. And anyone when they hear the word concentration camp, they think of Auschwitz.
Camp
Typically.
for Polish officials and dissidents. In July 1942, it was incorporated into the final solution. While Auschwitz I was to remain mainly a concentration camp for forced labor, a second Auschwitz camp at Birkenau would experiment with new extermination techniques. The first gas chamber there opened in March 1942, and it was outfitted with crematoria for disposing of the corpses of the dead.
Oh wow.
Once the prisoners were inside the gas chambers, SS men wearing gas masks would remove the covers of the ceiling vents, opening cans of Zyklon B poison. The body heat of the people pressed into the chamber caused the Zyklon B crystals to vaporize, releasing hydrogen cyanide gas. The Jews painfully choked to death on the fumes in minutes, even seconds. Auschwitz was also the place where German doctors experimented with mass sterilization of many Jews that were not destined for immediate extermination. What had begun in 1935 would find its terrible conclusion in that year of 1942. The Nazis envisioned a final solution that would exterminate Jewish life in Europe. And as long as the war was fought, as long as the Nazis remained in power, and as long as the camps remained open, the Jews would suffer and die.
Wow.
The final solution was the darkest chapter in German history, and one of the darkest in our world's history.
Wow, and it's surreal to see all those like different clips and whatnot, the recordings of. I'm assuming those
Actual
are
footage.
Actual footage,
Yeah.
right? It's surreal to see that because if it was so long ago, and you would think it would be so closed off, there wouldn't be any like footage remaining of it. But but from the footage that they're picking out here, it looks like there's actually quite a lot that showed what was going on there. Which once again, to what I said earlier, it's like how could anyone deny something like this happen?
Yeah.
And the Holocaust is vital to be remembered as both a commemoration for its victims and as a warning to future generations
Yep.
of the depths to which humanity can sink and the atrocities that man can commit against his fellow man if the darkness and the hatred in some human souls is left unchecked and allowed to grow and fester.
The final solution. Dreams fade away and all hope turns to dust. When millions burn, the curtain has fallen, lost to the world as they perish in flames.
Tyler, you've been to Auschwitz. I've never been there. I haven't been there yet, but you guys have been there, yeah?
Yeah, we've been there 2 times with the band stopping by. Obviously, we play a lot of concerts in Krakow, and this is very close to Krakow. It's a place I always recommend our crew members and band members to go and visit. And even though the second time we came there, I choose not to go inside. I think that one time in this place is enough. It leaves you with serious scars after you come out, that's
Wow.
for sure. When we wrote the song, we thought we seen so many documentaries, we read so much about Auschwitz that we thought we could sort of be prepared to what we're gonna face. I mean, both me and Joachim talked about this so many times afterwards that you can't get prepared for this. Because no matter how much you think you know about it, no matter how much you think that you are sort of prepared yourself, you are absolutely zeroed out when you start to walk around there, and when you walk out of there, there's not anything left in you, and that's why the reason is I had no reason to go in there and feel this again. I encourage the other guys to go inside, but I wouldn't go inside myself a second time.
And just
I just, I can relate to that. And when I was living in Europe, the first concentration camp I visited was Dachau.
You actually visited a camp?
Yeah. I would, there's a lot of business I was doing in Munich. And so Dachau is just right outside of Munich.
Wow.
And it's chilling, walking through the gates and then seeing, in Dachau anyway, there were not a lot of buildings still left, but there are still some. And you could see the administration buildings, and you could see the foundations of where the
Chambers,
the prisoners were kept, where the Jews were kept, in their bunkhouses, and then you could see other pits where there were mass executions from firing squads, and it's very chilling. And it's almost, when I stood there, it was almost, there was a lot of silence, which I appreciated. But it's almost like there's a spirit in the air that just whispers through you. Certainly that's what I felt, a spirit just kind of whispering through me, and almost voices from the ground, crying up. Not quite sure really how to explain it other than saying it like this poetically, but very chilling. Very somber. It was like visiting a cemetery, because you knew that there was nothing there but just death. But not just death, just a horrific death. The torture, the fear, all the pains you can imagine that one would experience. Anyway, so as he's describing that, it just brought me back to that time. Wow. And I've been there a few times, bringing back people when I would return on business.
Wow.
And each person, it was just very, very chilling.
Did you ever get a chance to visit some of the other ones? Did you ever visit Auschwitz, which they were at?
No, I didn't take a train to visit that, and I wanted to, and I think someday I will.
Yeah, I've never visited any concentration camp before, so.
Yeah, it'd be remarkable, on a note, just as a broad note, to take you to Europe and just see so much. I mean, just the richness of history. And, some interesting, some good, and obviously when you visit a concentration camp, horrific.
Right.
But some memorials of battle scenes, some that we've actually even reacted to.
Yeah, there was the one for D-Day. There's a cemetery.
In Normandy.
Yeah, in Normandy.
Yeah.
One
and there's another one.
Gallipoli?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Battle of Gallipoli.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But anyway.
Anyways, yeah.
Writing the song in the first place, I mean, it is a heavy topic, sure. But it is also a controversial topic. There are Holocaust deniers out there. there's
which is what I brought up as well.
When
It's like,
you
who
wrote
can
the
deny
song,
it? Yeah.
Did you get reception? Did you get critique from?
We get, as there can be sometimes with Sabaton, there can be people who say, "Oh, you are profiting from this," or you write a song to become popular about this. There are all.
Sorry to stop this, important point, but I got to tell you, whether they profit from it or not, and nothing wrong with that, but it's not profiting from the bad. I look at this as sending the message,
right?
Making sure that this history remains alive.
They're not profiting off the tragedy. They're profiting off of pushing the message forward and making sure that everyone stays aware and doesn't forget, so that people don't repeat that sort of thing in the future.
Yeah, and hats off to Sabaton for not listening to that garbage and saying, regardless, we're going to make this song, we're going to make this music, and we're going to share this message because we need to remember.
Yeah.
There are angles that people try to sort of attack the band Sabaton for what we are doing. Again, we are telling history and we are keeping it alive. And we choose, of course, not to see that we are in any way, promoting anything that we are singing about in this terms of, we're just saying this happened. Yeah. But we had a lot of people who got upset when we did this song. Okay. And I think that people get upset with it shows the power of the topic. Mm-hmm. And in one way, I think that it should just be very clear and not disputed, but it is.
Well, what about...
I find interesting you mentioned that it should be very clear, not disputed. I'm glad that they still chose to carry on and continue to make songs about history. They didn't let these like negative views like dissuade them from continuing to do what they do. Mm-hmm. Because in reality, there's so many people in the world with so many different opposing viewpoints that anyone will get offended about anything.
Absolutely.
If you're doing anything meaningful, someone will find it offensive. Sure. Because you can't take a strong stance on anything and not expect there to be people who disagree with it. Mm-hmm. And you just have to remember and stay true to yourself that what you're doing, if it really is something that's important to you, don't let others discourage you.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly. And, with the band, Sabaton, one thing I really appreciate that they do is they report and share history in a very objective manner. Mm-hmm. They're not giving a political viewpoint from it. I mean, sure, our emotions get stirred up to it, and our emotions should, because in history, there are just so many tragedies and horrific things, but they're reporting the facts, and they're reporting it objectively. I don't see them trying to stir us down a particular vantage point, other than the vantage point of seeing, here's what happened, and be aware of it and know it. And anyone who has a sense of humanity in them, like many of you viewers, you look at their songs, you hear their songs, you watch the videos, and you still can't help feeling something from it because they're just very powerful.
Yeah, and
powerful messages.
Yeah, and I find it ridiculous that whole argument because, like, what about museums, for example? Are you arguing that museums shouldn't exist because they're profiting off of historic artifacts and history, and some tragedies?
Great example. It's like Surge.
Those museums exist to keep history alive, just the same way that they're doing it. So yeah.
Well, as you said, you're telling the story of what happened. What about people that say, no, it didn't happen? What about them? They obviously get upset for a completely different reason.
Yeah, they get upset for a different reason, and we have seen a couple of those comments as well. But in the comment section, sometimes this it gets quite nasty when somebody tells like that, and the continuation of the comments is leading often into a sort of war. It's that kind of song.
Okay, well, I personally am glad that you write songs about glad.
Yeah, me too.
You know what I mean? I think it's important that you write songs about even the absolute darkest parts of our history.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And on that
totally
note,
agree.
I'm going to say goodbye for today. Never forget.
Thank you for watching Sabaton History Channel.
Wow, the jaws. And you know why they would keep the jaws, right? They would have someone who would sit down. They'd be picking out the gold teeth or silver teeth. Yeah. To melt it down into precious metals.
Right. Yeah. Well, even on that note, obviously with the dead, they did that. Even with those who were alive, they would go into an inspection room.
Yeah.
And even alive, they would have teeth pulled without numbing medication. Just the pain, the horrific pain of that being done for that purpose you mentioned.
Yeah.
To be melted down for this precious metal.
Yeah. And then there's the shoes. It's a very famous image of just like a room of shoes.
Yeah, the shoes. They would collect all of their merchandise, their goods that they could carry in their suitcases, and then separate it out and inventory it.
Yep.
And then even with the hair, they would reuse that to stuff pillows. And of course, I still can't believe this, that they would even take skin from the bodies and create lampshades with those and use it for other purposes. Yeah, they from what I've read, were they being the Nazi soldiers, very efficient with how they carried out the death, even stacking the fattest corpse on top of the others in the crematorium, because the fat would drip down and be a fuel for the fire and add the burning of the bodies.
Right, like a killing factor.
But they were systematic is what I'm
systematic
trying to share
killing
with protocols.
Yeah, so systematic killing machine or factory, like and they found like it's like a production process, or in this case a killing process, that they were very systematic about it.
Systematic to execute efficiency.
Yeah, but it was in this video, in this history video, they even said that it was, even no matter how systematic and how quickly they're going, they're killing so many people that they couldn't even hide it at one point. There'd just be bodies laying out in the open.
I also read, I think it was at Dachau, this one surprised me. And again, at Dachau, they didn't burn the bodies, but at other concentration camps that they did. And sometimes the burning was so significant that the ashes would fall down the sky and it would look like it was snowing.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's that. Sometimes history gets really dark, and unfortunately, there are these tragedies throughout human history, and hopefully in the future we'll have less of them, but we probably will have some.
Right.
Because that's just how things have been.
Yeah, and arguably, we can argue today, certain things going on in the world, different countries, certain ethnic groups that are experiencing re-education. They're calling it re-education, but it's either genocide or brainwashing to force assimilation into a political point of view and such. And it's horrific. Yeah. But again, hats off to Sabaton for taking history, and it's very sensitive too, because a lot of people are going to say, thank you for sharing the story, but you didn't say it this way, or thank you for sharing the story, but you didn't do it right, or there's so much more you left out. And so they took something which can easily be criticized for.
It's a touchy subject,
very touchy, but they still did it, and I think it's important to continue to keep that history alive. So, wow.
Yeah. So with that being said, we hope you guys enjoy isn't the right word here, but we hope you found it informative to watch along with us. There's a few things here that they covered that I didn't know beforehand, and in general, I appreciate what Sabaton do. If you would like to see more in the future, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell icon to stay up to date on future videos, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Have a great week, everyone, and enjoy the life you live and the breath you take, and enjoy that with family and friends. And you'll see us again soon.
All right, guys. Take care.